Hi everyone, it's Tim from the IB here. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for our weekly webinar. Part of our sort of IAB connected range of things that we're doing to keep you in touch with all of the latest updates while we're in the period of lockdown. Today we're going to talk about the gold standard and gold standard version 2, which we're looking to launch in September. Wanted to kind of let you know all about that and give you the chance to ask questions via the Q&A tool. Just before we get into that, as we always do, just to try to keep it a little bit interactive, we're going to do a quick poll. And the poll today is all about if your company is gold standard registered, certified, if it isn't, or if you're not sure. So hopefully we can get the poll up on screen. And if you take a minute to complete it, that would give us a good idea of the type of people we've got on the call. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to complete it. Great. Well, I can share that 78% of people on the call are certified, 4% registered, 9% not yet, and 9% no, it doesn't apply to us. So thanks very much just for taking a second to fill that in. So just as I said earlier on, this is part of a sort of range of things we're doing under the umbrella of IAB Connected. And obviously we can't sort of physically be with you, but this is our efforts to enable us to kind of stay in touch, to make sure you're up to date. So a couple of other things we've been doing under that umbrella. As well as you sort of joining us on Wednesdays to listen to webinars, we can also come in and present to you directly. So we've got a range of presentations up on screen at the moment that we can do virtually for your teams. So they range from actually similar to today's gold standard presentation to some of our latest research, the rules of effectiveness, the rules of attention. We can talk you through the direct-to-consumer brands with Born Online. We can give you an overview of what we're doing in sort of policy and regulatory affairs, or we can help you get the very best out of your membership. So if you do like the look of any of these presentations, just email one of the team or email me. It's tim@iabuk.com, and we can arrange for the right person to come in and present to you. Also, just sort of useful to remind everyone that if you haven't visited it recently, this is our case studies hub on the site. And actually, we're always looking for new case studies. So if you do have something around effectiveness, something you've done with a client recently, whether it's around video, display, whatever, we'd really love to kind of keep adding to this case study section. So do again ping us if you've got any case studies. Obviously, this time of year is the time of year that we would usually do Engage, which we can't do this year. But what we've done instead is we're running a series of audio sessions under the banner of Stay Engaged, which basically brings the sort of feeling, some of the sort of essence of Engage directly to you via audio. So we've had some really good sessions so far from a whole range of different people, and they go on to the end of this week. And I just wanted to play you very quickly a clip of one from last week, which was a million ads, which was a really great session.
Just think how important music is in all of our lives. These things get lodged deep in our emotional memories, whether it's deliberate or accidental. I mean, deliberately, it could be the first dance at a wedding or the use of music at funerals, these really key emotional times of our lives. Or it could be accidental, it could have just been the track that you were listening to when you met your partner. These have really deep emotional connections. For me, I started paying attention after Freddie Mercury's performance at Live Aid. I was about 11 years old. As a teenager, that's when you're learning what it means to be an emotional adult. And that same year, 1985, was the first time I ever went to Anfield. I'm a big Liverpool fan. but you hear a whole stadium singing the same song. It's a very powerful experience, whoever you support. And as a chorister, I understood this, because if you've sung together in a choir, you'll understand. You have to coordinate your breathing points. If you coordinate your breathing points, all your heart rates become synced. All your heart rates become synced. You have this incredible sense of community and togetherness.
So yeah, definitely check that out, because as you'll have heard, it sounds really fascinating. IAB Connected isn't just about us, but it's also about all of the stuff that our members are doing during this period. So I'm just going to hand over briefly to Hebe from our marketing team, who's going to give you an update.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I'm Hebe from the marketing team here at IAB UK. And for the last 10 weeks, this is where we've been sharing the wonderful ways in which many of our members are adapting to the COVID-19 outbreak and helping support our industry and each other. So this week, rather than highlighting just a handful of the insight we've received, I wanted to do a little bit of a roundup and also just say thank you to all of the members that have reached out. As you can see from the slide on my screen, we've had insight from across so many of our members. Our members have covered trends and behaviours during the COVID-19 outbreak, from delving into analysis on how us Brits' spending habits are impacted with Bauer Media's insight reports, to Bliss launching their Changing Behaviour series, which monitors patterns of consumers to help brands better understand how to communicate with their customers. We've also loved hearing all the creative and crucial ways our members are supporting their teams and our industry's health and well-being. From Captify launching their wellness stream, hosting 30-minute weekly live meditation sessions, open not only to their employees but everyone across the industry, as well as industry body NABS hosting wellbeing and career coaching to help those feeling anxious, isolated and uncertain of what the future holds. And with everything seeming overwhelming for many during these unprecedented times, many of our members have created support and guidance tools, from weekly marketplace pulses from Index Exchange to Oracle Data Cloud on keyword blocking and blacklisting during these uncertain times. We also saw the launch of Facebook's Business Support Hub, hosting support, tips and guidances for small businesses. There's also been some fun ways in which our members are keeping spirits high and keeping the office banter alive during these lockdown times. From twice weekly workouts, meditation sessions on Thursdays, a pub quiz every Friday, as well as weird and wonderful challenges such as their fridge challenge, Tailorfy certainly aren't lacking in team morale. Google has also launched a new YouTube campaign to encourage people to stay at home, covering cooking and cleaning tips to workout videos and studying resources. This is just a small handful of the incredible insight we've received from our members over the last 10 weeks. So I just want to say a massive, massive thank you for everyone that's been in touch. If you've got something you'd like to share, then please do get in touch with myself at hebe@iabuk.com. I'm going to hand back over to Tim.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Hebe. So we wanted today just to kind of talk to you about Gold Standard version 2. So I'll give a little bit of background, and then Tina, our head of AdTech, will come and give you a bit more of the detail. And if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A tool, and then Tina and I will be able to sort of answer those at the end. So just as a reminder, our vision is all about building a sustainable future for digital advertising. And the Gold Standard is a really kind of key part of that. It kind of represents, we launched it a couple of years ago, it really represents us getting our hands, getting our hands dirty, for want of a better phrase, but actually trying to change the market, trying to improve digital ad standards, rather than just maybe commenting on things, on how things should be, really encouraging people and giving them the tools to adhere to some of the existing standards so that we can kind of improve the industry for everyone. The Gold Standard really is a response to three things: ad fraud, brand safety concerns, and then finally ad blocking, all of which were emerging as significant threats a couple of years ago. So if you've got sort of three challenges, the three solutions that we originally put forward for that were ads.txt, JITweb's DTSG, and then the Coalition for Better Ads. So that's the sort of the basis, the foundation of the Gold Standard. just to kind of give you a couple of updates on stuff we've done recently. In February of this year, we had our certification process independently audited by ABC. So one of the interesting things about the gold standard is that people submit evidence directly to us. We then assess whether they've met the criteria, and it's all done in-house. So what we wanted to do was to make sure that that process is as robust as it possibly can be. So we ran a pitch, and after some different companies we talked to, we appointed ABC as the people that were going to audit our certification process. And they came into the office for 2 days. They went through all of our records. They made sure that we were doing what we said we were doing. And at the end of it, they gave us they were sort of broadly very happy with what we were doing, and they also gave us some really useful advice about how we can sort of tighten the process moving forward in terms of where we store files, how we can be a bit more specific about time periods when we're talking about evidence. And our commitment is to keep using ABC on an annual basis to make sure that our certification process is as robust as it possibly can be. Our sort of latest numbers are that we've got 97 companies certified, and we've got 12 registered, and so we're just a few off 100 people certified, and that's a number that obviously we're sort of pushing towards. One of the other really interesting developments that we've had recently is getting advertisers on board. So advertisers can't sort of certify in the same way that maybe sellers can, but what they can do is they can lend their support through the Gold Standard Advertiser Supporter Program. So we've got 6 key brands who all see the value in the Gold Standard and commit to training their staff internally, to talking to suppliers about how they should be certified. And we're obviously keen to build on these 6. So we're going to continue conversations with a number of big name advertisers to try and increase support for the Gold Standard. And another interesting thing, so this is from our ad spend study. So this is full year 2019. So we had the results out probably, I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks ago. And what it basically shows you is that companies that are Gold Standard certified within the display market are growing more quickly than those companies that aren't. So we got PwC to do the analysis, and 73% of the display market is Gold Standard certified, and those companies are growing at 21%. The remaining 27% are growing at 9%. So the average is 17, Gold Standard higher. If you're not Gold Standard, it's slightly lower. So from a sort of commercial point of view, it really pays off to be Gold Standard certified. So that's the kind of background. Obviously, we can go into a lot more detail about that. Most of you are from certified companies, so hopefully you're aware of most of the stuff that I've been through. But if you do need more detail, again, reach out and we can come in and present to you and your teams. So thinking about sort of Gold Standard version 2, the 3 things that we tackled originally, especially brand safety, were definitely the leading concerns when we launched the Gold Standard at the back end of 2017, coming into 2018. And so things have changed a little bit since then, and this is a really interesting insight into that change. So this is from an IAB Europe brand safety poll that they did across Europe last year. And it basically says, what do you think is going to be more of a challenge next year than it was this year? And privacy concerns is the thing that really stands out. And that very much tallies with our experience in terms of all of the work that we've been doing with the ICO and all of the concerns that the ICO have raised in terms of privacy and the way real-time bidding operates. So based on the fact that privacy is the biggest concern, it makes sense to add privacy and data to the Gold Standard. And the way that we're proposing to do that is through IAB Europe's Transparency and Consent Framework. And Tina will talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. And then finally, just in terms of bolstering some of the stuff that we're already offering. Sellers.json and supply chain objects are sort of natural extensions of ads.txt in terms of the way that we tackle ad fraud. So basically, the proposals for Gold Standard version 2 are to add the TCF and also to expand the ad fraud section. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to Tina, and she's going to talk through the detail of those, just to take you through them. So over to Tina.
Thanks, Tim. Hi everyone, I'm Tina, and I head up ad tech at iabuk UK. So as Tim mentioned, we are launching Gold Standard 2.0 in September, and as part of my presentation today, I wanted to talk to you in a bit more detail about what that looks like and how we build these standards that we're incorporating as part of the criteria and requirements of the Gold Standard. So most of you are certified for the Gold Standard, and so will be aware, familiar with the way that the Gold Standard works already. But for those of you who aren't, on one hand, we list out the standards and initiatives that we're asking the industry to adhere to. And along the top there, we have a list of all the different company types involved in the buying and selling of inventory. So starting from the publisher side, moving through to the SSP, the DSPs, managed services, and then the agencies. And then we map out exactly what is required to show that you meet these standards for each of those different company types. So if we move on to the next slide, I wanted to talk a bit more about how the new ones that the new initiatives that we're introducing are being mapped into the Gold Standard. So when talking about the transparency and consent framework and what compliance would look like as part of the Gold Standard, for direct sellers, the requirements are that a publisher, so direct sellers is the term that we use for publishers, is that they implement a CMP that's on the list of registered CMPs as part of the transparency and consent framework. In addition to that, so implement one that's listed, but also implement it in a way that is compliant with the technical specifications laid out within the transparency and consent framework. And as part of that, they should work with vendors on the global vendor list. I know there are a few large players that are not currently on the global vendor list, and I'll come on to some points about that in a moment, but aware a few of you may have already kind of picked up on that one. For indirect seller, so SSPs and support, support being DSPs, the list of requirements are similar for both, given that they're both technology providers, and their responsibilities are to register to be part of the global vendor list, to also work with vendors who are listed on the global vendor list. Their responsibility is to encourage their downstream partners to adopt the transparency and consent framework standard. And we appreciate that it's not within the technology platform's ability to control what is listed within a CMP. However, we have included a criteria to ensure that they have within contractual T's and C's that they are listed on the CMPs or any pages or websites where they are processing personal data or using cookies or similar technologies. And the final requirement is for them to measure the proportion of traffic that they are serving that's coming through with a TCF string attached. And the reason for that is so that we can start to move the industry towards moving more and more of their inventory to to be compliant with the TCF. However, we appreciate that, especially as we kick this off, as part of the standard, it's not something that we can expect to be 100% right now. So what we would like to do with this is get a understanding of what percentage of inventory comes with the TCF string right now across the industry, and then work as an industry to move that forward. For buyer support, so buyer support represents managed services or trading desks within agencies. Their responsibility is to encourage downstream partners to adopt the standard, the Transparency and Consent Framework standard. And in cases where they are using technology themselves, they should demonstrate how they comply with the TCF themselves, for example, by naming the companies that they are working with. And for buyers, being the agencies, kind of a pure play agency, their responsibility is to encourage all downstream partners to adopt and participate the TCF. If we move on to the next slide. I should say as well, just a reminder, or to let you know, that there is a Q&A function. It should be at the bottom or the top of the screen, depending on the layout of your screen. If you have any questions along the way, then please do submit your questions there, and we'll have some time towards the end to answer them. The next thing I wanted to move on to was to talk about how sellers.json and supply chain object have been implemented as part of the gold standard. So for those of you who are not familiar with sellers.json and the supply chain initiatives, they act as an extension of ads.txt. And as Tim mentioned, they aim to reduce ad fraud within the industry by increasing the transparency. So we have incorporated the requirements for these two criteria as part of the ad fraud ads.txt requirements that we currently have. And it's just kind of an evolution of them. So in terms of how we see sellers.json and supply chain object looking for different companies across the supply chain, for direct sellers, so for publishers, it's their responsibility. They can't be the ones to implement a sellers.json file. However, it's their responsibility to encourage their upstream partners to adopt the standard. It is also their responsibility to ask to be listed on the sellers.json files of those partners that they're working with. I'll talk about sellers.json and I'll move on to supply chain object in a moment. For SSPs, their responsibility, they are the ones responsible for implementing a sellers.json file. So their requirement is to do so, listing all the authorized publishers and resellers that they are working with. And they should provide evidence to show that they are keeping that information up to date. For DSPs, so support, it's not possible for them to implement a sellers.json file themselves. Their responsibility lies more with the filtering with supply chain object. So for sellers.json, their requirements are to simply encourage their downstream partners to adopt the initiative. And that remains the same for agency trading desks or managed services, and for pure play agencies as well, essentially just encouraging downstream to adopt the initiative. The requirements for the supply chain object. So the supply chain object would be passed on as part of the bid request. So it's the responsibility for the publisher to include the supply chain object in their bid request. It's the responsibility of the SSP to populate that field in the bid request. And it's the responsibility of the DSP to use that information to filter out for any unauthorized traffic. And so the requirement of the gold standard, we appreciate that this is a relatively new initiative. And so we ask companies or DSPs that are looking to certify to demonstrate how they plan to be able to do that filtering on their part. For buyer support, so trading desks or managed services, their responsibilities are to, in cases where a DSP is does not have the offering to filter for supply chain object, they should be encouraging those downstream partners to do so. In the cases where they are working with DSPs that have the ability to filter for supply chain object, they should actually be actively using that feature. And for pure player buyers, so just the planning arms of businesses, they are required to simply encourage the filtering of inventory through the supply chain object across the supply chain. We move on to the next slide. So here is a slide, a very wordy slide going against all kind of presentation rules. However, this is a slide that summarizes all the changes that are being updated on the as part of Gold Standard 2.0. So I currently just talked you through the addition of the new criteria, so how we'll be incorporating the transparency and consent framework, and how we will be including requirements for sellers.json and supply chain object. There have been some other updates to the existing gold standard, and those are based on evidence like, for example, Tim mentioned we had some audits done, so there was some feedback on how we could evolve the standards and make our audit process more robust. So based on that, we have provided more specific details on the evidence that we require for certification. We also understood that there were some new types of ad fraud that were emerging that were essentially helping fraudsters override the function that the functions or purposes that ads.txt provides by managing to get their themselves listed as authorized sellers on ads.txt files. So as part of our new criteria, we will be checking with publishers on how they make sure that the partners they have listed on their ads.txt files are verified partners of theirs. And for our buyers, so for the agencies that are certifying, we have also included a new criteria that essentially asks them to demonstrate that they are educating their upstream partners. So essentially they are educating brands or advertisers to become gold standard supporters. And our gold standard supporter initiative is one that Tim talked about earlier around getting companies to commit to working more with gold standard certified companies. We move on to the next slide. It's important to say that essentially with the gold standard, the way it's the intention of the gold standard is to help move the industry towards better standards for the industry. And so there are certain pieces of feedback that we've received on the criteria that we've proposed. So for example, as mentioned, not all companies are currently registered with the Transparency and Consent Framework. So what is the evidence, or what are we trying to ask the industry to do in those cases? And so we need to still identify exactly what are we going to be asking for as evidence in those cases. There are some environments where there is no CMP available for the inventory type. So for example, within connected TV or OTT and some audio environments, there are no TCF compliant CMPs. So what is a company who is selling all their inventory to those environments or part of their inventory to those requirements? What does certification look like for them? And in cases where, as mentioned, publishers are the ones that are responsible for listing the vendors in their CMP, and companies can have contractual T's and C's asking to be on those lists, but what do they need to do in cases when they are not listed? What is the evidence that we need to collect from them there? Because from our understanding, if they are not listed on the CMP, then they shouldn't be processing data at all. However, how do we collect evidence to show that that is what's being met in practice? So if we move on to the next slide, those are a few parts of feedback that we're currently considering and working out with our gold standard group. However, we are still publishing the gold standard 2.0 to collect any further feedback. So if there's anything that I've not mentioned that you still that you think is a point that we've not considered as part of this, we are opening to hear that. And if you have any ideas of the types of requirements or evidence that we could collect in those cases where I've just outlined, then we are also really welcoming and open to hearing your thoughts and comments on that. As Tim mentioned at the beginning, we are working to launch Gold Standard 2.0 in September, and any companies registering to certify at that point will automatically be registered to certify for the new version, and companies renewing their Gold Standard at that point will be required to meet the versions of the criteria for 2.0. So we have created a new page on our website. It's essentially our industry consultation page, where we have the full list of the full grid available for you all to review. We also have 78% of you were certified, so you would all be familiar with our compliance grids or the checklists that we provide. So we've also made those, the updated versions of those, available on the website. So please do check out this website and come back to us with any comments, questions or feedback to the Gold Standard email address by 10th July. That's pretty much all I had in terms of updates from my side. I will open the floor now to any Q&A. So if you bear with me, I'll just get some up. There is a question around any news regarding the gold standard becoming international, especially as the DTSG is moving beyond the UK. As part of, so with gold standard and in its current form, the two of the three criteria are already globally recognized standards. So ads.txt is a globally recognized standard. Coalition for Better Ads is also a globally recognized standard. And it is just the DTSG that is a UK standard only. So JICWebs and DTSG are looking to align, and JICWebs and TAG are looking to align on the brand safety criteria that they have. So there is, we are moving towards a direction where gold standard, or at least the initiatives within it, will become more globally recognised. In terms of the gold standard itself becoming globally recognised, I know that there is interest and conversations happening with a few other local IABs globally. However, it's a conversation that we are aware our members are interested in and would like us to work towards. So there's nothing in the kind of pipes right now, but it is something that we're aware of and working towards. But just know that the initiatives and standards that we certify for are already global, or at least moving to become more global. I'll hold for a minute or so just to check if there are any other questions that come in. Of course, this is not your only opportunity to ask. If at any point you have any questions, then feel free to get in touch with us either at the gold standard email address or myself directly. I'm tina@iabuk.com. That looks like it's it in terms of questions.
Great, thanks, Tina. As Tina said, there's plenty more chance to ask us questions, to get involved. Do check out the page on the website. We'll definitely be promoting that in member emails, and we'll be tweeting it. So we do really want to hear your feedback on that. That's it for today. Obviously, you can contact us directly, tim@iabuk.com or tina@iabuk.com. to ask us any questions, and the next Wednesday webinar is in a couple of weeks' time, so do join us, same place, same time in 2 weeks. That's everything for today. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us, and stay safe.